Up all of your time for speaking.
All
Thank you
right.
very much for coming. Okay,
Delighted to be here.
We're very, very pleased to have Keli'i Akina, the president of the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, and also you also know him from that very successful election for to the board of OHA, and which was quite a breakthrough here in Hawaii. And he'll elaborate on all the things that he's able to do. Well, we're very fortunate to have you here. Thank you very much, and then also we'll open up to discussion about his comments as dessert is coming up. Okay.
Well, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for inviting me tonight. Ken and Lee, such good friends for over 30 years. In fact, I knew Ken and Lee for about 31 years before I was invited to become president of the Grassroots Institute. But I had never heard of the Grassroots Institute up until maybe 6 months before I accepted that position. And Lee and Ken, you never told me about it. As if maybe you thought I would be an enemy. But the Grassroots Institute, which is my day job, is Hawaii's leading independent free market think tank that promotes libertarian values of individual liberty, free markets, and limited accountable government. But I've had some other exciting things take place, and I want to tell you about them a little bit. But, you know, when I was thinking of what I would share with you tonight, what really came to my heart was this thought. We owe it to our philosophy to learn how to win. We owe it to our philosophy to learn how to win. Because I thought, as I anticipated coming here to the foolish things, that I really wouldn't have to do much teaching at all about what economic freedom is, what libertarian ideas are. I wouldn't have to tell you who Hayek was, or who von Mises is, or Milton Friedman, or Ken Skulland and Lee Skulland. But I do want to say this. I congratulate Ken and Lee on having been named 2 of the 100 most influential libertarian thinkers in the world.
Bravo! Bravo! Bravo!
That's terrific. Congratulations. We'll have to toast you later on. But you see, I don't have to tell you anything at all about Jonathan Gullible, because you know that already. You see, our strength as free market thinkers is that we think. Mm-hmm. And our greatest strength of all is that we're right. We are absolutely right that people were made free and are designed to be free, and that the government doesn't own us. Not only are we right, we actually pronounce what most people feel. Do you think most people want the government to control their lives? Deep down inside, they don't. And we're the people who are able to pronounce that. So I don't need to bring you anything at all. So I thought, gee, I would find some polite way to turn Ken down and go see a movie. That's the anarchist streak inside of me. I don't want to be obligated to go anywhere and do anything. But the more I thought about it, I ruminated over a message that has been so important to me in my life, and that is that we owe it to our philosophy to learn how to win. Ralph Benko wrote an article which had a surprising title, because he's a libertarian and a conservative. And the title of his article was, "There's Not Enough Money in Politics." And that's a scandalous kind of article for a liberal thinking world, because the mantra is always, we've got to get money out of politics and so forth. But what he pointed out was that the people with the most money tend to win. And the people with the truth tend not to realize that. We spend most of our time polishing our truth, but don't fully realize that it's very simple things that get people into office, like lying, cheating, and stealing, and money. I'm just joking in a sense, but really there's an art to winning. Now, I don't mean anything disrespectful by this, but Donald J. Trump is not president of the United States because of his policy positions. We're still learning what they are. He's not president of the United States because of his truth. Donald J. Trump is president of the United States because he knows how to win. And let's sit back for a moment and admire him. Give him some accolades there. He's a competitor. You like that, free market people, don't you? He saw the election as a free market, and he went after it as a competitor, and the best competitor won. I liked that, this election. in thinking about what to call tonight, I ended up with, we owe it to our philosophy to learn how to win, but I played around with another title first. If it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, it doesn't matter. And I like that because no libertarian really believes that. If you ever ask a libertarian to say in 5 words what his philosophy is, or her philosophy is, they will spend probably 10 pages telling you why you can't say it in 5 words. But what won the election this year? Make America great again. And that echoed across the world. It echoed even in Great Britain as they Brexited and so forth. Interestingly, Xi Jinping in China has the same motto. Literally, it translates into rejuvenate China, which is basically make China great again. If it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, it doesn't work. It took me a long time to realize that because I'm a philosopher. And every day, the nagging doubts I have about the value of the money spent on my education get the better of me. So I'm always having to justify my education by using bigger words and longer sentences and longer paragraphs than the average person. That's just so that you know that I have a Ph.D. That's how insecure I am. Because that Ph.D. doesn't bring me gold and wealth and women. That Ph.D. just brings me a piece of sheepskin. And having all the education in the world, having all the right answers, having the ability to articulate them well, and having the ability to debate well, which is a hallmark of libertarians, doesn't put us in power. Because the truth is not what wins. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying to abandon the truth. But I'm saying that if we understand what market we are competing in, it is a market in which the truth does not win. It's things other than the truth that win. And if we truly believe in our truth, we owe it to that truth to learn and do the things that win. Now, it took me a long time to come to that, but I began to realize it as I studied the history of philosophy. And you know that wonderful painting by Raphael called The School of Athens, which has all the famous philosophers up until the Southern Renaissance and Southern Italy Renaissance. But the 2 central figures in the School of Athens are Socrates and Aristotle. Socrates, or actually Plato and Aristotle, because Plato wrote down what Socrates said. Plato is the old man with the white hair, like John Carroll back there, pointing upward. Aristotle is the young man, pointing downward. And if I am going to oversimplify philosophy, that points to the fundamental battle in the Western world, which is we've fought between those who say ideas are the most important thing and matter. Ideas matter. There's nothing more powerful than an idea. The battle between the idea people and the practical people. For Plato, ideas like truth and justice and beauty exist beyond the everyday realm. They are eternal, they are permanent, they mean something, like liberty. For Aristotle, he wasn't too sure that we had a lot of access to knowing what the ultimate truth was. So he looked at things in the world. If you were to ask Plato what constitutes a beautiful person, or a beautiful, let's say a beautiful woman, he would say, that is a woman who most resembles the ideal of beauty in heaven. And so you have the concept of a heavenly beauty. For Aristotle, he'd say, just ask any man to line up 10 women. He'll have no problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that tells us what beauty is. You see, it's a practical matter. Now, who ultimately won in this battle in civilization? Well, I'm going to oversimplify history again. Socrates, whom Plato represented, ultimately was put to death by the government for polluting the minds of students, kind of like HPU and Ken Scullin. They haven't put you to death, but they've relegated you to a very small office in a corner for polluting the minds of students. And who gets the big bucks there at your university? It's the business guys. Aristotle went on and he tutored a student named Alexander the Great who conquered the world. In a sense, all libertarians are Platonists. And by that I don't mean that you believe in a world after this world. I'm not talking about it in a metaphysical sense, but I'm talking about it in the sense of the belief that there are ideas that are noble, that are true, that are eternal, like the idea of liberty. We believe in that. But sometimes we as Platonists are what I've often been called myself, so heavenly minded we're of no earthly good. So heavenly minded we're of no earthly good. So I spent most of my life, at least 3 decades, devoted to ideas, great ideas, and devoted to education, but not really devoted to my pocketbook, not devoted to gaining power. And it's only been quite recently that I decided, well, you know what? I owe it to my philosophy to learn how to win. So in 2014, I launched a 4-year plan. And my goal really was, within 4 years, to do something that had not been done in Hawaii. Hawaii is the bluest state of all states politically. This last election in 2016, we became the state with the only single-party legislative house, the state Senate. We have about 5 Republicans in the state in office, no libertarians, and about, John, is it 45, 50 other legislators who are Democrats? Even more, actually, closer to 70. We have a fully one-party government system that runs the legislature, both houses, that runs the school system, that runs the unions, that runs our congressional delegation, runs the executive branch. We are a one-party government here in the state of Hawaii. So 4 years ago, I said, I want to show people that individuals with different ideas can win. So I set off on a 4-year plan to go into 3 elections. In my first election, I knew we wouldn't win, but I didn't tell anybody that, because you don't get the football team together and say, get out there, play your hardest. We're going to lose, but go jump over the cliff. First election, we got 32,000 votes. That was massive, because it takes about 10 to 15,000 to become a legislator. I ran for the trustee at large in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Second election, that soared to 96,000 votes. The third election, I'll tell you in a moment how many votes it was, because it was one of the most underreported political stories of 2016. In 2016, on November the 8th, there were 2 stories that didn't get reported by the press. And later on, I spoke with journalists and political pundits, and they said next to the Trump victory, these were the most significant political stories in the state of Hawaii. The first was a relatively unknown conservative libertarian ran against a Democrat who had been in power for 20 years and never lost an election, who was campaigned for by the unions, who was supported by the Democratic Party, and who was financed by the Bank of Hawaii, on whose board she sat. That incumbent was defeated by me, and the number of votes was 164,000 votes.
Wow.
Thank you for your vote, Lee. I tell people that today, they go, wow, I didn't read that in the paper. And I said, it was underreported. 164,000 votes. Put that in perspective. To become a state legislator, you need 5 to 15,000 votes, depending upon the size of your district. You can actually become a congressperson here in this state with as little as 125,000 votes. My 164,000 votes was more than Kirk Caldwell in the city and county of Honolulu, more than Colleen Hanabusa, and more than, what's that other person? Not quite, Chats, not this time. But it was a huge number of votes.
Maisie Hirota.
Yeah. And no, I was thinking of one more. More votes than Tulsi Gabbard. Now think about that. That wasn't reported. But it happened. And it was a guy who was known for saying government should be smaller rather than bigger. Government should get out of our lives. We should stop taxing and stealing from people, and so forth. A fairly contrarian point of view to the status quo here. But while everyone in my campaign was jumping up and down on the night of the election, I looked depressed because I had my nose buried inside my laptop computer. I was quickly trying to go through the online archives of election statistics, and I was calculating something else. And this was the second story, which was the biggest political story of 2016, and it never got reported. Before my run for office to become trustee at large in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, 45% of people who had ballots would mark trustee at large or trustee in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. In other words, only 45% of the already dismal turnout of voters in the state voted for OHA elections. And that's because most people don't know what it is. They don't know who the candidates are. Maybe they feel only Hawaiians are allowed to vote. And even if they know that everybody votes in it, they may feel only Hawaiians should vote in it, and so forth. For whatever reason, only 45% of the people voted in it. On November 8th, 2016, when the ballots were tallied, it was found that 45% shot up to 73.1% of every person who had a ballot voted in the trustee at large election.
Wow. Yeah. Impressive.
That was a shift in voter behavior unheard of in the state of Hawaii. And the reason I'm telling you this is I want you to take heart that we can change the conditions in the state of Hawaii. And more than that, we can win in the state of Hawaii. And we absolutely owe it to our philosophy to learn how to win. I'll tell you that the political parties that are trying to defeat the dominant political party have no idea as to how to win. Now, I could say other things, but I see you're recording the presentation tonight, so you're going to get the sanitized version. Therefore,
Would you feel more comfortable if we turned it off?
This is fine, but all I'm going to say is they don't know how to win. They're invested in outdated technologies like get out the vote, get people to go to the polls and vote, register people to vote. Registering people to vote is a dismally failed enterprise in the state of Hawaii, and it doesn't make any differences. It just makes people feel that they're doing something. And then on the day of the election, driving around to pick people up and take them to the polls is another dismally failed strategy. The strategies to win must be much broader than that. They must be much more savvy, and they must be much more high-tech. I'm not going to tell you today because you are recording it, and I don't want anyone else to use this except Anthony back there. But what I would like to share is a few things that I myself have learned through trial and error as to what it takes to win in Hawaii. I'll share with you 5 or 6. Here's the first one. Winning is about uniting, not dividing. Winning is about uniting, not dividing. Say that with me. Uniting, not dividing. Somehow we think that to be the contrary party, to be the countervailing voice, we have to divide people. We have to be anti-something. We have to be anti-rail, or we have to be anti-this, or anti-that. Now, let me tell you the truth. The reason we're so loud at being anti-something is we're trying to raise money from our friends who are all fundamentalists in their views of conservatism or libertarianism. So then they'll know we're truly loyal, or we're going to meet the litmus test and so forth by being the person who stands up and rails against this and rails against that. But you don't win in Hawaii by dividing. You win by uniting. But we're also suspicious as libertarians of uniting. We think that when you unite people, you're betraying your values. and you're just saying, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. No, uniting is not about getting together on every point. It's about getting people together on one point. The key to uniting is to have as minimal a point of unity as possible. I remember when I joined the Grassroot Institute, and I'm so glad Mark Maniscalco is here today. He's a board member of Grassroot, and Ken is a scholar of Grassroot, and he's been involved in it for a very long time. In 2013 March, Grassroot Institute Board asked me to come on board. A few months later, I did a tour of the islands, and I went to Hilo. I spoke at the Hilo Conservative Forum. It was an organization largely of Republicans and Libertarians and Tea Party members. And they decided to get obnoxious. They asked me to speak on Hawaiian sovereignty in Hilo. And they advertised in the paper and on the radio and so forth, Akina, OHA candidate, is going to talk about Hawaiian sovereignty. And they egged on the Hawaiian sovereignty activists to come out. And so when I showed up there were two distinct groups in the audience. There were the conservatives and libertarians who were part of this organization against one wall, and there were the sovereignty activists against the other wall. And the tension was so great you could cut it with a knife. When I walked in, I realized my prepared notes on Mises were not going to work. So I decided to do what my mother had taught me. I just went into the audience and I hugged people and I said, "Aloha, Auntie, aloha, Uncle," and got people shaking each other's hands and so forth. Then I pulled everyone together and I opened with a pule, a prayer, and a chant. "Oh, na ikahala metalehua. And so as everybody's jaw dropped and my friends, the Hawaiians there, were saying, "Hey, who this guy?" We got their attention, which was primarily to give me more time to figure out what it was I was going to say to this group so it wouldn't be explosive. Then it occurred to me, there was unity in that group. There was tremendous unity. They didn't know it. Members of the audience were suspicious of the other side of the room, but when I looked out, I saw something that they all had in common, and I talked about that night. It was easy for the libertarians and the conservatives. I quoted Ronald Reagan to them. I said, "Our problem is, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem." And they go, "Yay!" And that's exactly what the Native Hawaiian sovereignty activists felt too. Both audiences do not want the federal government telling them what to do. The Republicans and the conservatives, the libertarians, don't want greater control of federal government in the Hawaiian Islands. And the Native Hawaiian sovereignty activists don't want greater federal control. They don't want to be an Indian tribe. They didn't want the Akaka bill or the Na'iaupuni program and so forth. They want the federal government to leave them alone. That narrow point became the basis of uniting two groups, both of which came out strong for me in my final election last year. So that created a swing factor with the general public, but of course with these special interest groups as well. The key to winning is not dividing people. I could have spoken the full measure of my principles that evening, in which case I would have offended both groups. I didn't have to lie. I don't want the federal government to be increasing its influence and control over us. And that was the point of commonality. So as you're thinking of gaining political power, or as you're thinking of promoting candidates for office, urge them, or design for yourself a plan by which to find one thing around which to rally people, because winning is about uniting, not dividing. And I'll tell you this, the people of Hawaii are sick and tired of divisiveness. Whether it's pro-rail or anti-rail, whether it's pro-GMO or anti-GMO, whether it's pro-TMT or anti-TMT, or remember when we had the Next Era deal, pro-Next Era or anti-Next Era? And one of the reasons we sometimes get ourselves as libertarians sucked into the pro-anti and anti point of view is because we're looking at the ultimate positions for which we stand. We're not looking at the fact that the world is still in process and the world is far away from what is ideal. Ken and I used to banter a bit about the Jones Act because Ken, as a true Platonist, promotes the ideal of repealing that 100-year-old federal statute. And it's a noble thing to teach, along with truth, beauty, justice, love. Absolutely. It belongs in the academy. This is what should be taught in the academy, that a world without the Jones Act. Notice for our viewers here, I'm not even explaining what the Jones Act is to this audience. And I admire him and so forth. But maybe you were suspicious of me at first in our original conversations when I would talk about, well, maybe we should consider just a modest reform of the Jones Act first. So I came up with another phrase. Instead of trying to promote repealing of the Jones Act, which would turn off 98% of all the people in power in Hawaii, how about honoring the Jones Act for what it has done, the little that it has done since 1920, and update the Jones Act for the 21st century. Let's update the Jones Act. So I found myself invited to a conference sponsored by the ILWU, the International Longshoremen and Warehouses Union, and their maritime unions, to speak on a model for ferries between the islands that would increase union jobs. You see, to go from Hilo to Honolulu is going between two U.S. ports. So if you transport cargo between those two U.S. ports, you are under what 1920s Maritime Act? The Jones Act. Therefore, those ships must be bought from American shipbuilders. But we don't build ferries. We don't build them very well, the few that we do. And they cost 5 to 7 times more than buying them from our allies. Smart people like in Japan or Netherlands or South Korea who make ferries all the time and who use ferries in Hong Kong harbor and so forth. But if we could buy them at a lower cost, we could actually get ferries here between the islands, and keeping a part of the Jones Act intact, namely that the vessels need to be crewed by Americans, would mean more union jobs. They actually let me come to a union conference and promote that to union members and union officials and union execs. Now, do I believe in all the planks of the Jones Act? No. But if I can find some point of unity around which to unite union workers and anti-Jones Act people, Democrats and libertarians and Republicans, that's the key not to truth. That's the key not to changing the world. That's the key to getting in office. That's the key to getting power. That's the key to doing homage to my philosophy, because I owe it to my philosophy to learn how to win. And the first principle is uniting rather than dividing. Does that make sense? You see, the truth is not going to win in this world. Lee Scullen opened up a little differently than Ken Scullen. When Ken opened up today, I knew that he wasn't going to open with a prayer. But I did know that when Lee was going to talk about libertarian principles, she was going to say God-given. And I don't know what happens in the conversation between the two. But I do know this, that God is not going to win this in this world. And he tells us so. When will the truth win? Some of you were raised in church. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. In that day, truth wins. Plato wins. Jesus wins. The Jones Act is gone. But in this, until that day, we're on our way. And the game that we can win is whether or not we can get into power. And that's why winning means uniting rather than dividing. Say that with me. Winning is uniting, not dividing. A second principle is that winning is about leading and not complaining. Winning is about leading and not complaining. One of the problems in standing up against everything, and we should be a contrary voice, is that we sometimes show so much energy in opposing something that people have no idea what we are promoting. For example, take a look at all the people who've opposed the Honolulu Rail. Well, do you know what they stand for, though? All we know is that they are anti-rail. And that leaves people flat when it comes time to go to the polls. Does that make sense? They want to vote for people where they know exactly what they're going to do. And complaining, it doesn't really cut it in terms of becoming a leader. But when you have solutions to the problems people recognize, you have the opportunity to win their hearts. What is it that people here in Hawaii want to see? Number one, they want to see lower prices, right? Number two, they'd like to see affordable housing. Number three, they'd like to no longer see homeless people. Now, are those Democrat, Libertarian, or Republican values? They're not values, by the way. They're not ideology. People don't vote on ideology. The person who can show how to solve the problem of homelessness, how to bring housing prices down, how to lower the cost of living in the state of Hawaii, and several other issues, is the one that people will flock around. Remember that old entrepreneurial saying, build a better mousetrap and people will beat a pathway to your door. And that's why the second factor in winning is always going to be leading rather than complaining. When I got onto the board of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, I knew that on day one, the 8 other members of the 9-member board were not going to greet me with open arms. There wouldn't be a lot of aloha necessarily, because I had just a few months earlier taken the entire board to court at the United States Supreme Court and had won an injunction shutting down the race-based election that they had sponsored and paid money for. I had caused them to put out of business their latest plan to create a race-based nation. Now, I'm proud to be Hawaiian, but I happen to hold the position that the majority of Hawaiians hold, and that is, we're proud to be Hawaiians, and we see that as consistent with being Americans. That's what the silent majority of Native Hawaiians believe. But more than that, I also believe in the Constitution, and that officials in a government agency have no constitutional basis for setting up a race-based nation. So when I came into the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, everyone was expecting me to advocate that position, because they all knew I held that position, and they all knew I had an upper hand on them, having taken them to court and won, and having won. But I'll tell you this, since getting into office, I haven't mentioned it once. I don't have to. They know where I stand. Instead of complaining about their position there, I've decided to grab other issues. So as a result, I've paid attention to the fiscal condition of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. I saw a great opportunity because my team analyzed the finances of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and discovered that they were spending at a rate out of their trust fund that would put them into bankruptcy in 9 years. That's how much they were spending. Out of $50 million, they were spending $5 million a year out of it, and they weren't growing the trust fund either. I took that as my cause, and I did research on that, and I promoted the idea of protecting the trust, growing the trust, and using the trust for the mission of helping Hawaiians. Then, I pointed out another reason money isn't getting to where it goes is because of a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse. So I promoted the idea of a forensic audit, to audit the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and pushed very hard on that and brought people together and won those battles. In fact, as a result, I have gotten more legislation passed at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs Board than any other trustee this term. And part of that legislation was the unanimous vote that we would audit the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for fraud, waste, and abuse. That was my proposal. And then they appointed me the chairman of the audit. And what they saw me doing was building a strong OHA. In all of my articles and my speeches, instead of tearing OHA down, I am now building a strong OHA through fiscal reform. Now, understand the subtlety of this. Number one, it takes me out of the position of being the complainer, and instead puts me in a position of being a leader. And number two, it gives me something to lead that will ultimately accomplish the goal that I want to gain. If OHA spends its money correctly, not on fraudulent or unconstitutional means, it will ultimately not be able to establish a separate race-based nation. So the strategy leads to winning the position that I want to win. Does that make sense? And the bottom line is this. Whenever conservatives or libertarians run for office or get into office, we need to show that we have competence in fixing what's wrong with the system. Not simply pointing out what's wrong, but fixing it. And I am confident that we do have those answers. We know what to do, but we have to be able to package those in ways that people can understand. So winning is about uniting, not dividing. It's about leading and not complaining. I'll quickly give you a few more ideas. The third is winning is about people, not positions. Winning is about people, not positions. We libertarians know our positions backward and forward. We can argue against Jones Act easily. We know why the Jones Act does not really contribute to national defense. We know why the Jones Act does not really support jobs for Americans. We know all this. But two things. One, that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. And number two, it doesn't seem to move people to want to change the Jones Act. It's because in winning, it's about people, not positions. It's about people, not positions. Sam Sloan was the last Republican in the state Senate. He lost his election on November the 8th. I liked Sam a lot. I consider him a mentor. He had some great ideas. Did Sam ever come here to the Foolish Things?
No, actually, he hasn't.
But he'd be a great guest to have
He would
here
be,
too.
excellent,
And Sam's truly a libertarian at heart. For 4 years, he tried to introduce a measure to the Senate, to a Senate committee, which would reduce the level of GE tax that is charged to the poor and overall. And he introduced it as a fiscal reform measure. It failed every time. It never made it out of committee. So I decided to go and take some people with me and argue for this measure. But we took with us a pregnant woman who was on welfare. And she testified to this committee as to how hard it is to get groceries and how much the GE tax actually adds to her. And we brought data showing that for those at the lowest economic level, the GE tax, because it is regressive and it is repetitive, takes about 18% of their income. Did you know that? It's shocking. Well, as she was testifying, you could see tears in two of the committee members' eyes. So the committee decided to take a break. And all Democrats and one member, Sam Sloan, the Democrats all went into a corner. It was really silly, as if he was a spy. and they caucused, and they came back to the table, and they had an announcement. They said, you know what? We like Sam's bill. We're going to take his name off of it and put it under our name and send it to the floor. Well, it didn't pass yet, but but Sam was thrilled. Sam was thrilled. He wasn't in it for the credit. But it reminds us that winning is not about positions. It's about people. So winning, it's about uniting. Say that with me. Uniting, not dividing. It's about leading, not complaining. It's about people, not positions. And that's, when it comes to the Jones Act, I had the opportunity to brief Senator Mike Lee, the former Attorney General of Texas, Senator, who's the former Attorney General of Texas, who's argued wonderfully before the United States Supreme Court. Name just slips my mind. You all know him. Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz. I had the opportunity to brief him in Dallas on the Jones Act. And he's a smart man. He knew what it was, but wasn't as aware of many of the things you are aware of, because it's not something that faces him all the time. He was very gracious. But at the end of it, I asked him, what would it take to win Jones Act reform or repeal? And he said this. He thought about it, and he said this. He said, show pictures of starving Hispanic children
Yeah.
and say, the Jones Act caused this. And he was right.
Yep.
His political instincts were right. It's not about positions. It's about people. And if you can take your libertarian principles and reduce them to pictures of starving local kids, it's for the keiki. It's for the keiki. You will win. That's the way it works. Here's a fourth idea. Winning is about them, not us. And this may not apply so much to libertarians as it does to Republicans, I think. I go to a lot of functions for libertarians and for Republicans as the counterparties. I also go to Democratic events, and I see a big difference in all of them. Usually when I go to Republican events, it's the same crowd, focused on the same message, and everything is insular. Now, is this recording on? I like Republicans too. We have to understand that there are two terms that are important if we want to know the nature of what our gathering is. One term is a modality, and the other term is a sodality. A modality exists for itself. It exists for its members. A sodality exists for people outside of the group. A modality spends most of its resources on its own members. A sodality spends most of its resources on those outside. A modality has rules for membership, and if you want to be part of it, you have to believe in a certain set of beliefs and doctrines and tenets. A sodality has a very minimal number of beliefs and encourages free thought and so forth. Modality tends to bring people together of a similar education, such as our group here tonight, or similar ethnic group, as in many of the Republican meetings that I go to, or a similar age group, or a similar economic level, and so forth. A sodality, however, is so focused on the world that you can't tell a difference between what the sodality members are and what the rest of the world around them is. And by the way, that's exactly what I see when I go to Democrat rallies. I see people of all backgrounds, economic, racially, values-wise, and so forth. But I tend not to see that in the gatherings that we hold as libertarians, or the gatherings we hold as Republicans, and so forth. We tend not to be sodality so much. Now, again, I'm saying I see this far more amongst Republicans than the libertarians, but winning really is not about us. When it's about us, we do things that satisfy us. We do things that meet our needs. Like this gathering tonight, I love it. I love sitting down with Ken Scullen, and we frequently talk very esoteric talk that nobody else can understand. Because it's so good. It's intellectually stimulating. The majority of people in Hawaii have other ways of enjoying themselves. and modalities tend to focus on bringing together people who are interested in faith, fellowship, and friendship with each other, camaraderie. Now, it's comfortable, and it's very comfortable, especially when we have a siege mentality in a state that is dominated by very bad thinking and very bad policy. So the question is, do we want to be a modality or do we want to be a sodality? On certain days, I want to be a modality because I like the country club that I'm a member of, and I don't want people walking in off the street. I want them to earn their right to be there through the free market, so they can be snobs as well, like everyone there. But do I want my intellectual and political movement to be a country club? Do I want it to be a modality or do I want it to be a sodality? That's the important thing. In order to win, it has to be about them, the people who are different than us, not about us. And our gatherings need to increasingly bring together people who are different so that we create that energy and that connectivity to the world that wins. So, once again, winning is about uniting, not dividing, leading, not complaining, people, not positions, them, not us. And finally, I'll close with this. Winning is about candidates, not parties. Winning is about candidates, not parties. Parties that are losing the game politically tend to turn on themselves and attack within the group. Henry Kissinger said that the smaller the territory, the greater the tyrant. Any of you who've been on a condo board know what that is that is like. And that's what happens to parties that are out of power. They're so disengaged from fighting battles with the rest of the world outside of the party that they fight over turf within the party and so forth. And they live under this myth that if we could only build up the party, then we could recruit candidates and support candidates, and then we could win politically. But that's backward. Parties do not produce great candidates. Great candidates produce parties. Parties do not produce great candidates. Great candidates produce great parties. It's always about the candidate. It's always about the winner. And that means the number one task you have if you want your philosophy to go from something that you simply share and polish and discuss to a movement that wins political power and changes the world. It means we've got to find those individuals and do everything we can to back those individuals who have the capacity to win. Don't even worry about trying to create a party. Don't even worry about trying to build a party and create rules and regulations and have officers and so forth. Just find the winning candidates. Find people who have the capacity to win and pour all your energy into those individuals. When they win, they will have followers, and those followers will create the party. And so those are my premises so far. I hope that they're of some value. Say them with me one last time. Winning is about uniting, not dividing. Leading, not complaining. People, not positions. Them, not us. Candidates, not the party. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a few questions here, John.
When John Carroll, my campaign manager and number one funder, is ready to put his money where his mouth is, I will announce.
They had 4 sheets of people signing up saying you should run for U.S. Senate. And then we ended up with 37,000 votes in the primary. The most I'd ever gotten in that kind of primary was 5,000 or 6,000. And then $58,000 we spent against the shots at $2 billion. And we still got 92,000 votes. And I just could not believe. And I think there's people here that need to hear exactly what you're talking about tonight. And I would like to say that the first time I saw Keli'i speak was at the Libertarian Convention, and I thought, that's got to be the man. And that's why I've been successful, because he's listening to me all the time.
Thank you, John. my mentor, John Carroll. Thank you, John.
No, but I'm serious. He's got exactly the right approach to this and approach to that lines up. I think especially that is my favorite subject. And I think that if we can get the message out to the people, what it's doing to them, their everyday lives, the homeless, the jobless, this is going to be a very winning time for all of us here. And I'm so glad to see Keli'i has done as well as he has against almost unbelievable odds for him to take out
Apollyon.
Napoleon the last time was just so wonderful. And very
It's a good sign that you couldn't even remember her name.
Yeah.
Too obscure to me. Yeah.
That's funny.
Great.
okay, Keli'i.
Thank you, Father.
Any other thoughts or questions? Like Micho.
Since we were talking about principles of winning, I come from the business sector and I know the importance of the money you are to create so-called mind share in marketing, right? Promote a certain idea and get somebody to buy your product. You need to put a lot of money to explain what the product is about, back and start so somebody's buying it, right? So the same principle applied to politics as well. Now my question is, so what's the role of money in media ownership in winning?
Well, money always gives an advantage, but the one who has the money doesn't always take advantage of it in the best way. So it's not so much how much money you have, but how well you use the money you have. And the data will show that there's no direct correlation between pouring money into a race and consistently winning. Although, if you know how to use money well, it's a great advantage. I think that in this digital age, we have more options for the use of money than we've had before. And with the emerging technologies of artificial intelligence, being able to empower marketing segmentation strategies through digital media, money goes much further, and it will create a more equalizing factor for democracy, as we've seen it creating an equalizing factor in other industries as well. So that I think that's key. The downside of money is that people who base their campaigns on traditional forms of campaign finance are giving away their souls because they owe favors for that money. And so one thing that was very important to me was not only the ability to raise the highest amount of money in the race against my candidates, but to raise it by going to the largest number of donors. And to me, that was very important to keep me honest. But I do want to say this in context with what I've said tonight for this audience, for our community, for libertarians. We do need to put much more emphasis on getting more money in the game. That's very important. Money is certainly much easier for those who are in the Democratic Party and connected to the unions, because it's a power structure. So we mustn't fail to realize how very important it is for us to raise money. And one of the biggest mistakes we make is we put out candidates who don't know how to raise money. And in fact, I have to tell you, in the last election, amongst the Libertarians and the Republicans, and I spoke with most of them did not want to raise money. Most of them didn't like raising money. And that's a losing proposition there. I love to raise money. And if you'll give me 3 minutes after the meeting tonight, I'm going to ask you for money. But do you see, we're so intellectually honest as libertarians. Many of us find ourselves averse to doing that. So to those of us as libertarians who are not at ease in asking money, let's hang around our libertarian friends who are free market capitalists and take some lessons from them. Yes.
I'm not from Hawaii, I'm from Tennessee. And after college, I remember going home to work in my hometown just about the time that one of the largest factories in the community shut down. There were a lot of jobs in the community. friends, and one of the major reasons I dislike him is because I feel like he's turning the party into a protectionist party. I've noticed a lot more people who identify as conservatives starting to question the virtue of international trade. And thing is, I have seen the losses that have occurred in Middle America in my time working there. And I guess my question is, I still believe in the long-term benefits of trade, but how am I going to sell that? Where are the starving kids there?
Well, when it comes to the job situation, I'm not sure that Trump is anti-protectionist. I'm not trying to defend him. It's just that I don't know what his ultimate motives are beyond wanting to save American jobs. But I think the problem is precisely that. American jobs are going to be lost not because of protectionism, or lack of protectionism. American jobs are going to be lost because of technology, and we had better embrace that and start training our children and to understand that possibly 50% of all jobs that exist today in the market will not be there in 20 years. And that as jobs are replaced by automation, and automation is replaced by higher forms of artificial intelligence, we're going to have to retrain completely. So to me, I'm a little perplexed at the relationship that we talk about between jobs and economic protectionism, when we really should be looking for ways of advancing our education and our economy in a much more advanced level. Unfortunately, as of 2 years ago, China has begun outstripping the United States in the production of Ph.D.s in technology and science fields, and has 4 times as many students in China enrolled in upper tier universities equivalent to MIT than we do. And I think those are some of the questions that we really need to be looking at. So to come full circle to the question you eventually went to, which is how do we market? In other words, how do we put faces on this? We really have to think of our children and education in terms of new levels of technology and the future. We have to revamp the way we're speaking. President Trump is speaking to an industrial age model for the most part, which still resonates very deeply with rural America and industrial America. And that's where he has a strong base. But that's more from an image point of view than the reality of the way future economies are going to work.
Let's take this moment to thank Keli'i for speaking. We can talk more to him personally, but also Lee just put out a nice big apple pie with ice cream. So have some dessert too. And by the way, I guess there is lemonade that I forgot to put out, but I will put out lemonade as your dessert drink too if you like. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Before you
Yeah.
finish, I'd just like to address the gentleman's comment.